6, a helping hand with your land.
Neil from Essex here to do a 60 horsepower Kubota tractor throwdown. You can see between these two models here, this L6060, MX6000, and M6060, each one of these machines shares a 60 horsepower engine, but they're all made for very different applications and have some dramatic differences between them. We're going to take some time today and walk between each one of these models and show you how they're different. The series identifier of these three machines should tell you that there's some differences in their intended applications between the MX, L, or M series machine. Starting with the M series over here, this is one that we can go through that has a very specific application. When we're getting into a larger tractor like this is a machine with a much bigger chassis, much heavier rear end, much larger loader. Despite still being 60 horsepower across these other models, it's a lot more physical tractor. And it's made for that more demanding, heavier duty type work where you need some more weight and you need a tractor that's going to be doing more ground engaging type work. Think going out and pulling a plow or doing some haying and that kind of stuff. It's kind of the tractor that tends to be targeted towards that kind of customer. The transmission in this machine is going to drive a lot of that. So while these other two tractors have different variations of a hydrostatic transmission, this one is a gear drive. So you've got clutch and gears and a hydraulic shuttle in order to change directions. They're going to make it a tractor that's better in open areas than working in tight places. The L series tractor here is the opposite end of that spectrum. So this is Kubota's top end, their largest of their compact tractors. So 60 horse engine, but in a machine that's still very capable, but isn't heavy for heavy's sake. It's a machine that's not gonna go into, say, pulling a plow through a field and that kind of stuff. Capable of a lot of good work, but not large and heavy for no reason. This tractor is going to have the most deluxe transmission out of the three here, and this is where we start to draw some differences to the MX over here. The MX is kind of the hybrid between these two machines, so it is a utility-oriented tractor with a compact tractor's transmission in it. The transmission in the MX is going to be a standard mechanical hydrostatic, so when you're stepping on the pedal on the floor and rocking it back and forth, you're operating a straight line down to a mechanical hydrostatic. The L series, though, is different in that way. This is still a hydrostatic transmission, but it's a Cadillac of a hydrostatic, being completely electronically controlled and having a lot of really advanced features in it. So different customers here for these machines. If you're looking for the high end of comfort, you're doing less utilitarian type tasks, an L series tractor is where you're probably going to gravitate, compared to an MX series machine that's going to be a little bit more value oriented and a little bit more utilitarian minded. We're going to go through some more differences here, and we're really going to focus on these two models because they're more difficult to distinguish between. While that M6060 over there is geared toward a very different customer, there's a lot of gray area between these two. So we're going to pop here between these two models and find the differences. Under the hood of these two tractors, you have the same diesel engine, Kubota's V2403 direct injection common rail turbocharged diesel engine. While they are the same engine, they actually perform differently in these two tractors. So in the case of the MX, the engine in this application over here produces about 2 more additional horsepower than it does in the L6060. Interestingly enough, though, when you look at engine horsepower in a tractor, it's the Pto horsepower that really tells you the tractor's ability to deliver that engine power out to your implements, right? In the case of a high horsepower tractor like this, it's a pretty important number. And while the MX is actually creating more engine horsepower, it has less Pto horsepower than the Grand L does by about 1.5 horsepower. Now those differences are going to be pretty difficult to pick up on in operation. I just find it really interesting that the transmission differences between this model, between the more economical mechanically controlled hydro and the more advanced electronically controlled hydro, have some differences in their efficiency. So all things being equal, the L6060 is going to create a little bit more power coming out the back. I've alluded to the transmission differences between these two tractors a couple of times. The L6060 is going to have Kubota's HST Plus transmission, the most advanced hydrostatic transmission the company has ever built. There's a lot of features in this transmission that I've done some pretty in-depth videos on at literally 20 minutes, going just into how each one of the features and functions in this tractor works. From a high level, it's an electronically controlled hydrostatic. It's going to give you some additional features. So you have 3 mechanical ranges and then a high-low stacked on top of that, give you 6 effective ranges. The computer is smart enough in this tractor to actually shift this high-low for you, so it can do a lot of things without you having to think about it. It has a function called Auto Throttle Advanced that ties the hydrostatic pedal to the engine RPMs to make this thing drive more like a car or a wheel loader instead of a traditional tractor. And a stall guard feature that watches the transmission pressure and makes sure you don't push it into relief. Responsiveness control that you can dial in on the dash to change the way that it behaves. A lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff that's very hard to explain quickly. So if you're interested in all of that, check out my other videos that go through those things in a lot more detail. The MX is going to have a traditional mechanically controlled hydrostatic transmission, just like virtually every other hydrostatic tractor that's out there. You'll have a low, medium, high for 3 working ranges, and then a pedal on the floor that the harder you press it, the faster it's going to go. It's a straight, very simple mechanical system. Both of these tractors are going to sport essentially the same 3-point hitch linkage on the back. This is a class of tractor that's called Category 2. Once you cross about 50 horsepower in Kubota's product line, you start getting these heavier link ends with larger balls to support larger implements on the back of the tractor. So both of them have very deluxe heavy-duty 3-point hitches. There is one mechanical difference back here. So the MX series tractor is going to have a very traditional rock shaft type lift system in order to lift these arms up and down. That's where you have an hydraulic cylinder that's internal to the transmission that lifts this arm up and down in order to raise the 3-point hitch linkage. The L6060 is a little bit more advanced design than the MX. In the case of this tractor, the lift cylinders for the 3-point hitch are actually external to the transmission. They're here on the outside of the tractor. This gives a couple of benefits. Serviceability on these, if you ever had a problem with them, is easier because they're not tied up inside the transmission case, and they also lift more. This tractor is going to have about 25% more lift capacity than the MX series equivalent does, and that's driven by simply the geometry here of this 3-point hitch and the location of these lift cylinders. Now, that said, it's very unusual for a modern tractor to be limited by its 3-point hitch lift capacity. As a salesman, I almost never am going to go through and look at the weights of implements in order to determine whether a tractor is going to be able to lift them or not. But do know there's a significant specification difference here where the L series is outperforming the MX. At the front axles here, there's an interesting difference in the front tires. One of the things that has always made the MX series really appealing to me is that it uses a really stout, wide front tire, which I think looks fantastic on the tractor. The L60 uses a smaller tire that is more typical in this size machine. The front axles are actually different as well in order to accommodate the differing gear ratios here. So it is not possible simply to take the MX front tire and put it over on the L60. In terms of the rear tires, they actually share the same part number back tire. So those are exactly the same and are fully interchangeable between these two tractors. I'm sitting here in the MX series tractor's cab, and you may have heard of me refer to this machine now a couple times as being a little bit more utility or economy oriented than the L60. A lot of that plays out here in the cab, so I've done a video dedicated to this machine here as well. But when you walk around this tractor, you're going to find a couple places in its interior that distinguish it a little bit more from the deluxe L60. So that machine with a deluxe transmission in it also receives a little bit more deluxe interior than this tractor does, but not in significant ways. Most of that is going to pan out here on the right-hand side of the operator. The L60 is going to use a more modern control layout that puts most of the controls in an arc across the right-hand side, where your rear remotes are very easily accessible. Your loader sticks are mounted higher up on shorter throw levers. This is going to be a little bit more traditional design that you'll see in a little bit more economy-priced tractor. So your rear remotes are going to be down here by your sides. Your loader stick is going to be a little bit longer and not contained in as nice of shrouds with, a little bit more basic boots. And the seat suspension is not going to be as nice. This seat is not quite as comfortable. It's not cloth. It doesn't have as deluxe of a carriage underneath of it. Now, there are some options here on the MX that you can add. It can take an air ride undercarriage, and you can add armrests onto it, which are not standard equipment. So some things in this tractor can be optioned back up to more deluxe levels, but there's a reason why you've got this difference. So the reason for some of those cab differences, a more basic transmission, comes down to price. The price spread between these two machines is a full $7,300, a fairly significant amount, given that their capacities are very, very similar to each other. As an operator, you'd have a hard time really going through and telling a difference between these two machines when you're sitting in the seat and running them. Now, there are a couple of things that the L60 obviously has in order to justify that, right? A more deluxe transmission, a nicer cab, and a mid-PTO. This is going to have a mid-PTO shaft on it that allows it to do things like run front belly-mounted snow blowers, brooms, flail mowers. Those front implements can be run on this machine, where the MX has some fairly significant cost savings that remove that mid-PTO as being an option from this tractor. So, depending on what your application is, if you're looking for a machine for simple loader work, you're a fairly experienced operator, you're not going to be spending loads and loads of hours in the cab, and MX is going to be an extremely good value. If you're looking for something a little bit more deluxe, you're not an expert operator, you benefit from the HST Plus features, you would use things like a front snowblower, the L60 is going to be a really compelling option in that direction. So I'm a firm believer that there is a customer for every configuration of these tractors that they offer us. It's frustrating sometimes that there are so many options to choose from, but when you start diving into the purpose behind every one of these models, you can see that there's a very specific customer in mind for every one of them. So if you're going through the buying process for a tractor and we can help, or if you have parts or service needs for a machine you've already got, give us a call at Messick's. We're available at 800-222-3373 or online at Messick's.com. There's too many numbers here for me to remember. 62 implements. That's pretty loud. We'll wait for him to go by. Well, maybe that's it. Yeah, it would have been better if they just left the dirt on the ground. Like, you have no sense that you're doing more harm than good.